This video is sponsored by Sunflex UK. My name is Neil and this is Real Life Architecture. Have you ever bought a house that was less than ideal because it was affordable and in a really great area? Anyone in the UK will be familiar with the idea that location is the most important factor in determining the price of a property. When I started offering consultations almost 2 years ago, I didn't appreciate just how big an issue this was. By far, the most popular service on the Real Life Architecture website is the online consultation before buying a house. It seems to be much easier to find the right location than it is to find the right house, and lots of people appear to be willing to buy an imperfect house if it's in the perfect location. They just need to know if they can alter or extend that house to suit them. That was the dilemma facing a client who wanted to buy this property in England. They plan to do 4 things to this house that are fairly common. You might be thinking of doing any of the same alterations to your home, but each one has significant challenges. There are chapters down below if you want to skip ahead. When booking a consultation, I always ask people to tell me their construction budget, or the sum of money they don't want to go beyond. This client told me they had £200,000 to spend on all the work they planned to do. Now, £200,000 is a lot of money in anyone's book, but it doesn't go as far as it used to. I've been altering and extending homes in the UK for 15 years, so I have a good sense of what it costs. For this project, the budget is feasible, but the client will need to make compromises. You'll see what I mean. The most important thing the client wanted to build was a new extension to the rear of the house. They plan to square off this space at the back, cut down the existing external walls, and create a new open-plan kitchen, living, dining space. They mentioned the neighbour had built something similar just a few years back, so the first thing I did was look up the local planning portal to find the drawings, and it's a good thing I did, because some things jumped out that could cause significant issues for my client. Now I should say this drawing of the neighbour's house extension is way more detailed than necessary for a planning application. Clearly whoever produced it was thinking ahead. If you look here, this dashed line is described as the existing foul drain. Now, drains at the back of a house are not unusual, but what we have here is a common drain. That's a sewage pipe shared by several neighbours. You can see it crosses the boundary line, and that means any building on or near this pipe needs the permission of the local water authority. This is fairly common, and a structural engineer can deal with it for you, usually during the building regulations application process. It just adds more time and cost to the process. The bigger issue is the boundary. My client wants to maximize the space at the back of the house and build right up to the boundary. The problem is, it's not certain where that boundary is. Look closely at this photo from the estate agent. The fence has this small return section, and the neighbour's extension seems to be set back from where the fence might have been. That means there could be an area of ground right next to the wall of the extension, accessible from my client's side, but owned by the neighbours. Now, why would they do that? The answer is legal uncertainty, and I gave my client the same advice I suspect the neighbours got when they designed the extension. Unless you can get absolute legal certainty on where the boundary line is, you should build far enough back that your extension can't ever be called into question. See this note on the drawing. Boundaries estimated and to be confirmed on site before work commences. All works, including gutters and footings, to be contained within true boundaries. Whoever produced that drawing knew what they were doing. They saw the fence and wondered if it had been changed over the years and doubted whether it represented the actual legal boundary line. To add to the problem, the boundary is at an unusual angle to the house. So I told my client they had 2 options. They could get a surveyor and a lawyer to produce detailed drawings and title deeds and have these agreed with the neighbour and registered with the authorities. Or they could build the extension far enough away from the boundary that it would be safe from any future legal challenges. The problem is that will create a narrow space between the 2 extensions. Aside from being a waste of space, it would also become a maintenance headache. Now imagine trying to clean dead leaves out of a space 1 foot wide and 10 feet deep. It might be best to take the first option even if it is more expensive in the short term. Then the construction budget comes into play. I told my client to expect to pay £3,000 plus VAT per square metre for the extension. I recently made a video about the cost of house extensions in the UK with a detailed breakdown of what goes into the square metre rate. I put a link in the description if you're interested, but I should say that square metre rates don't include the cost to take down external walls and will be massively impacted by the cost of kitchen units and new glazing for the extension. My client had to take a moment to absorb what I told them about the extension before we moved on to the next idea they wanted feedback on. converting part of the garage into a utility room. From a practical standpoint, there's no problem here. Just run some drains and plumbing supply pipes, install some electrics, and you're good to go. You could even insulate the space and make it fully habitable under the building regulations. The problem is parking, specifically off-street parking. I've mentioned this before in other videos, but the more bedrooms in a house, the more cars that house will have. The planners use a formula that directly connects the two, and each local authority has the power to decide if certain neighbourhoods are already too busy, and any development in those neighbourhoods must ensure cars are parked within the curtilage of a dwelling. That means off-street parking. If the garage is converted, the loss of the car parking space in that garage must be accounted for, and my client will have to show that they can park the minimum number of cars on the driveway. I suspect they'll be okay, but I don't have accurate drawings of that driveway, so I can't be certain. If the driveway isn't big enough, then no new utility room in the garage. My client had not appreciated these two things were connected. Next up, the client needed advice about making these upper floor windows larger. They wanted to maximize daylight and get a nice view over the countryside beyond, and I don't blame them. The problem they might encounter is that the planners might decide this change affects the overall composition of the row of houses. This is usually called streetscape. It's the idea that when a number of buildings have a uniform appearance, making changes to one will adversely affect the rest. I can see the immediate neighbour has already changed the appearance of their home, and these properties can't be described as having any special architectural significance. Now, I'm not being cheeky, they aren't listed or in a conservation area, so in this case, I think the client could give it a shot and have some chance of success. If during a planning application, the planners felt enlarging the front windows was going too far, they would usually contact the architect to let them know and give them the opportunity to change the design before refusing the planning application. As we're talking about windows, this is the right time to mention the sponsor of today's video. Sunflex UK design and manufacture high-quality aluminium windows and doors in the UK. I've used Sunflex products on many of my own projects, and I believe they offer a great balance between cost and quality. Don't just take my word for it. Check out these videos I made about Sunflex windows and doors, including the cost. There's a link up here and in the description below. The final way to add value to this house would be to alter its internal layout. The wall between the existing living and dining rooms is probably load-bearing because it appears to line up with the wall between the bedrooms upstairs. I recently made a video about the cost of removing load-bearing walls. There's a link in the description below. And one thing that video doesn't have, though, is the cost to take down a chimney. I get asked about this one quite a lot in my consultations. Very few people use fireplaces anymore, and masonry chimneys can take up a lot of space. Now, it is possible to prop a chimney, so the part going through the roof will remain, but the structure inside the house is removed to free up space. That can get expensive, so in this case I think removing all the chimney is the way to go. Patching up the hole in the roof and the damage to the first floor bedrooms will account for about half the cost, but it is feasible. So with all that in mind, this might be the layout the client would end up with. The new extension is about 25 square meters, so that would cost upwards of £75,000 plus VAT, and that won't cover the cost of taking down a chunk of the rear wall or the cost of the internal alterations, nor will it cover the cost of new kitchen units or the remedial work to the rest of the house. This is the ideal money no object layout, and it assumes the boundary issue can be resolved. In reality, the client will have to strike a balance between how much extension to build versus how many internal walls to knock in order to balance the budget. After the consultation, I emailed the client with a summary of our discussion and a copy of my project guide document. This gives detailed advice on how to find the right local architect and how to brief them so that the project gets off to a good start. These are the kind of problems clients discuss with me during online consultations. If you're thinking of doing work to a property anywhere in the UK, follow the link in the description below to the reallifearchitecture.co.uk website. The site has loads of free guidance, links to other videos and blog posts discussing how to alter, extend or renovate property in the UK. You can download a copy of my project guide document, which is packed full of useful information, and you can also book a consultation with me if you really want to go into detail about your project. Thank you for watching.